To call to order the special meeting of the Planning Zoning Commission for June 26, 2024. And Colleen, if you would please call the roll.
Sure. Commissioner Castillo,
Aye.
Commissioner Gloez,
Present.
Commissioner Giannini is absent, Commissioner Marks,
Present.
Commissioner Morrison,
Present.
Commissioner Muir is absent, Commissioner Schultz,
Present.
Chairman Stratman.
Here. So let the record reflect that we do have a quorum for this evening's meeting. And the purpose of this evening's meeting is just that. It's a public meeting, and it's to get an update on the comprehensive plan. The PCC is serving in its role as the steering committee of the comprehensive plan. So the comprehensive plan consultant, Teskin Associates, Aaron and team, are here to present and highlight the work on the plan since February of this year. They have a number of items to discuss, and we'll be looking for feedback from the PCC. So staff, Sarosh, if you would, please introduce the consultant to us again.
Thank you. As you already know, this is Erin Sigliano, and with her is Ryan Peterson of Epstein. They will be providing a presentation for you tonight, and then we'll be looking for your feedback. Erin, I'll leave it up to you to decide whether you want questions to be asked during the presentation or leave questions up to the end. So we'll play it by ear according to how you feel. So go ahead.
Start by saying thank you.
Could you speak into the mic? There is also a handheld mic if you'd like. Yeah.
This works good.
Yeah.
Thank you for hosting a special meeting. I know it's been a busy couple months. We're excited to be following along with that. And since last we've met, we've been hard at work on a number of things. I know you have the presentation was shared. We're going to be covering it tonight. We're going to just dive into it. This is an overview of our agenda that we're hoping to cover. We'll start with project updates. A lot has happened in the few months since we met. A lot of internal collaboration to make sure we're all moving on the same page, and staff, public works, will cover those updates. We're also going to present the draft framework plan. So those are more or less the sections as we see them coming together for the overall structure of the comprehensive plan. We'll be hitting on a summary of goals and objectives. We're going to be doing a heavier hand on some versus other. We're about 50% of the way through on the draft. This is an ideal time for us to check in, get your feedback, checkpoint things, make sure we're not missing things, massage things. We did that at the last meeting, and I really appreciated you pushing us on that. Even though we were at the community visioning phase, it really helped us come here with clear expectations of we want to know how we want to arrive at implementing the vision. So that's what you see up here, the placemaking, Main Street strategies, streetscape and development guidelines, those mobility and bike ped concepts. Those are the rising stars of the feedback that we received, as well as where we see a lot of opportunity. There's more depth to what we'll be covering from that, but that's where we're going to focus a good chunk of our time. In terms of discussion, we actually peppered in a few spots for that. We're going to be walking through a lot, and we don't want to throw so much out there that you don't have a chance to respond. Definitely encourage notes along the way, but there's a few incremental time periods. Sound good? Mm-hmm. Okay. So, since last we met, a quick, for those who are tuning in or maybe who haven't been familiar with the community visioning phase, we were just wrapping that up in February when we met. There is more there than I can cover in one session here tonight. So I'd encourage anyone who's new to this process and tuning in to go to lakezurichtogether.org, and it lays it all out there. What you see here are the primary themes of some of that feedback. So the greater diversity and density of destinations, shops, dining and things to do, visible arts culture, seasonal activities. You see someone busking there, outdoor performances, because that was very highly rated on the poll. Safe, walkable, and inviting sidewalks, trail networks that connect to destinations safely. This also includes wayfinding information, streetscape. and then maintaining existing housing and exploring new options for varying life stages, styles, and needs. So those are kind of the 4 primary buckets and themes of the community visioning that we heard throughout that robust process. Where are we? So we're 3/4 through. We're on that little star there. We have gotten through 75% of the plan. So about just less than a year ago is when we kicked things off. We had our kickoff event at the farmers market there, and we're on schedule, which is great. Comp plans are typically around 18 months, so we're hitting that critical point of bringing it all together. What comes up next? Well, we're going to be applying the findings and feedback from today to really drill down and further the draft of the plan. We'll share a digital copy with you all for review when we get there. We're going to be planning a community open house for the public to also review and share their feedback on it. And we're strategically planning that for after school starts, just so that folks have done vacations. And so we're looking to do that in fall of 2024. And there will be a public hearing there following.
Could I just interrupt 1 second?
Yes.
Before we start, for those people who are either new, looking online, or new to what we're going to be doing, the one thing I want to make sure that we are aware of is that based on the survey that we sent out to the residents of Lake Zurich, this is the feedback that came back from them, and then you were hired to put a plan together based on that feedback. And therefore, once that plan is in play, it's all about how do we get to that point where we pay for these things, how do we address those things. So I want people to understand that this is still in that phase where this is a want. It isn't something that somebody can just say, oh, this is what we're going to have, and this is where, because the monies aren't there at the moment, and the question becomes, where do they come from? How do we put this whole thing together? So I just want to make sure that that is perfectly clear to everybody who's watching and aware of this, that this is a hope. It's a great hope, and you're helping us get to that point based on the feedback that's come from the residents.
Yes, absolutely. There's a system of checks and balances here. The feedback from the community survey was brought into those results, as well as the own dedicated poll, workshop series, and events. That's actually very much why Ryan is here tonight, the checks and balances. How wide is a road? What can go on that right-of-way? Is it a shared use path, striping, those kind of questions. It's also the element of jurisdictions and public-private partnerships. So there's a lot of collaboration and volunteerism and a whole balance of things. So we'll roll those out. So in April, to kind of kickstart us from our meeting here before you that we had at the end of February, we scheduled a charrette with staff, and we can kick back over to the presentation here. The charrette with staff was great. We had lots of paper, maps, and we really started to dive into much of what we discussed at the last meeting. Main Street, streetscapes, geography, key infill areas, development. Following that charrette, we rolled up our papers and we put on our glasses. It was the day of the eclipse. We enjoyed it in Breezewald Park. Lots of people were out there. There were some professional photographers. And we did some field work. We've done field work all along this process, but having just kind of steeped in what we were just talking about, what are the realities and checks and balances, we wanted to get out into the field and start to understand some specific areas. So here we went to some of the industrial area. And I always like to say that planning is an opportunity for education. For those who don't know, this is a berm, and it is majestic. Berms are on the side of roadways, and they serve a lot of purposes, from wind control to beautification to you name it. And you note that it's on the other side of the power line. This didn't magically happen. These are all plans that put these into place, but that's a really nice berm and evergreens. So the observation and documentation. we're looking at those goals, right? So this goal, safe, walkable, inviting sidewalks and trails and getting to destinations. How do we connect people? How does it make sense? We have major busy corridors. We want to keep people off of those to the best of our abilities. And so, here we're looking at a person walking on the side, no sidewalk there, and a person biking. So we're trying to understand how people are interacting with their environment and the data, the right-of-way widths and whatnot. We explored some different business districts, right? We actually had lunch at Stomping Grounds. And there's a lot of different areas over by Rosati's too that have these like cantilever kind of style sitting areas. So understanding what those environments are. We've heard about different parking lots being kind of, I think the high school student group we talked to was talking about behind Craving Euros being kind of chancy. And so we're trying to figure out what's the opportunity here to benefit different modes of users and sense of arrival, and also what we like to call sticky places. So getting people to hang out in these areas comfortably. The far right photo, that building I just think is really unique. And the right-of-way width there is very, very wide. So there's some possibilities there that I'm intrigued by. And right across the street from that, of course, baseball game going on right now, is the Historical Society and a terminating vista coming right down Church. You see it. And so you think about these key points, too, in the community. We're also looking at that form of visible arts, culture, and seasonal activities. So what are the canvases for that? Where do people gather? What are the opportunities? Public-private partnership, a big part of that. So following up in May, Public Works actually reached out to us. They have a lot of aspirations and plans in the work, and so we set up a meeting to connect with them and make sure we're all shooting on the same cylinders in terms of the feedback we're hearing and the goals that they're looking to roll out. That meeting focused a lot on the walkability, Main Street, as well as opportunities to boost identity. We know that the creative crosswalks are great, really well received. The city of Chicago needs to take a page from your book. We know that they also slow traffic. The studies that are coming out around them are really impressive, and Ryan's the expert there. But we chatted through different types of placemaking and identity boosters, right? So you can have creative crosswalks that you can paint. There can be inlaid ones, like you see in the middle photo there. There can be really creative ones to boost identity. You see a far right one. But how do you do it in a way that is thoughtful, right? It's additive, and it all comes together and works together. We focused in on the area here in the intersection of Main Street and Old Rand Road. We looked at the opportunity for an intersection identity decal. Could that be a compass that plays off of, the six-pointed star? These were all conversations. We're not landing on anything, and this isn't a branding project, but we talked about the opportunities there and how it's important to also think about bump outs in the bigger picture, right? You don't want to do work that then gets dug up because you want to do more in-depth work. And we chatted a bit about the promenade, and obviously the interplay of that with the Block A development is big opportunity. Any developer that's coming to the table, and we've seen the developments that have to this date, need to integrate this larger community component. Block A is such a precious piece of property and huge potential with community vitality, and everyone sees it. It was brought up at every engagement session. We shared back a few inspo ideas for creative crosswalks. I think it's really intriguing to do a top-down, look-down. You're kind of embracing the whole feeling like a giant looking down. But these were just a few examples. And again, you want to tie into the identity. So where the location is, here the example is over by the library, to reinforce. So that was a great meeting, and then following up in June, we coordinated with the village manager's office. They were submitting a grant application and pulling from all of the feedback of the comp plan. And so Ryan and our team at Tesca, we collaborated, we provided some graphics to reinforce that feedback for them to submit. If it's not awarded, we're still going to walk through these recommendations. It's the grant is focused on active transportation, so improvements to the PED, the bike network, and getting money to fund that and to plan that. So it was really good timing, and yeah, that went out. So that brings us up to where we are now. The draft plan framework and focus areas, how does it all shake out to reinforce these four, core buckets, as we're saying, from the engagement, is across these series of, there's 6 main kind of areas, and then the implementation guide, which will be that robust kind of checks and balances, how much does this cost, when should it be phased, and funding. So we're gonna do a quick run through of each of these areas. Places, spaces, community, and design. That includes housing and some economic development. We have connectivity, mobility, and accessibility. Programming, partnerships, local economy. That's about the businesses, activations, events. Sustainability, resilience, and well-being. The environment, parks, green initiatives. Corridors and special area planning. So that's looking at infill development, opportunities along Route 12, 22, annexation. This is a long-term plan, right? 10 to 20 years. So there's going to be fun and fundamentals that we're going to walk through. And then future land use and character districts, which we'll touch on as well. So without further ado, places, spaces, and community design. So for each of these, we're going to highlight the overall goal. And I'll preface this by saying vanilla is not the right word, but the goal is going to be kind of broad. And then the objectives we run through is going to give it more teeth. So placemaking, these specific goals focus on strengthening that connection between people and the places that we go to, and that socialization, as well as housing and what makes Lake Zurich function and fun. So the first goal here, Lake Zurich has a distinct sense of place and sense of arrival. Its character and charm make it attractive and welcoming. So I'll hit on each one of these in the following slides, but in a nutshell, we're looking at corridors and gateways, character districts and design guidelines to facilitate the development that you want to see going forward, beautification strategies for what we like to say, those quick wins, so the public-private partnerships, activations, and a lot of what the facade improvement program has facilitated, which some exciting updates there later in the presentation. Corridors and gateways. So here we want to focus on enhancing the corridors and gateways, those key entries into town. Here we're driving down Route 22, and the middle photo there off on the left, you have actually an infill development site, right? So as part of future design guidelines, you could have that development site flag to say, hey, this is a keynote corner. Put public art here, put something here to signal, turn here to go to Main Street. I'm going to get into the character districts in a bit, but there needs to be a make you look area, and that can come in the form of really great building design, wayfinding, arched gateways. There's a number of different ways to do it, and the photos that follow will hit on some of those, but we need to kind of up the ante on that. The character districts and design guidelines are a way to facilitate quality development that strengthens both the social and economic vibrancy. So we know Lake Zurich Florist is very well received in terms of the structure, the materials, and you look at it too from an aerial perspective, and it's got great roofline delineation, it's got the parking in back, it's got blade signage, this prairie kind of architecture, and so distilling that in guidelines is important because it sets expectations by both the developer to say, oh, this is what they want, you waste less of their time and money, and what the community wants to arrive at. They aren't regulatory, but it's something to really guide that conversation and have a checks and balances on. In terms of distilling what Lake Zurich character districts are, we see them as, the different forms and functions. So you have the Main Street area. We have what we call the transitional district, which would be those historic homes kind of along East Main, those areas where live-work uses are being conducted, very natural and organically occurring in historic communities. You have the commercial corridors, residential neighborhoods, which vary, right? There's going to be different forms within that one, and then your natural areas. And then this is just a list of some of the common elements design guidelines cover. They don't need to be all inclusive of here, but these are the common areas. So you look at Lake Zurich, sorry, I'm getting my L's, F's. This is a very similar kind of makeup, right, where you have that setback. How do you communicate that style in guidelines? This would be a good example thinking about Old Rand Road, right, as you head towards Route 22. It's a narrower right-of-way, and as development occurs, with design guidelines, you can say, hey, set that building back a little bit, have your awning like the florist. That provides you with what we call an amenity zone, which you see here. Different businesses can activate it in different ways. It can be provided for on-street dining, which right now, if with the current buildings, you can't do it. It's too tight of an environment. So this is, again, 10 to 20 years, but as development occurs, infill occurs, you continue to do this and maintain it within a certain window. You don't want huge gaps and variances and setbacks. It provides a lot of opportunity in terms of activating that streetscape and also bringing in the type of businesses that would want to be there. Another important component of design guidelines is distilling things like corner building articulation. You see, this is just an example, but up in the corner right, a lot of corners can be left open, right? If they aren't developed with some thought. And so corner articulation in terms of what developments go and how they're oriented, you need to take into context, but this is another area that can be touched on. I mentioned the transitional district. These are really fun. These are really important. People don't build these today. This is a character element that should be celebrated. It should be distilled. It should be something that we document and we put into the guidelines. These are just other examples of different kind of live-work transitional districts and what you look at in terms of creating that inviting environment, and also thoughtful ways you can do blade signage here. That's in a subtle way. So what we want to arrive at with the Main Street area development opportunities is to really answer what type of development the village wants to see going forward, and what is important factors of that, right? We don't control the market, but we can say, hey, this is the Main Street area. Ground floor transparency is important to us. Upper story step backs, this list here that you see. Maximizing lake views, if it has the opportunity to do that. Continuing marketing of the facade improvement program and amending it as needed going forward to make the small tweaks to help facilitate this vision that we've seen. And so this is the rendering of Craving Euros. And I don't know, Sarosh, do you want to share a few words about this program or the work underway?
Essentially, we found that the facade improvement program has helped a number of business property owners improve their exterior facades or carry out some infrastructural work as well to help their buildings, first of all, last longer, but make them more attractive places to do business. So that's in a nutshell what our program is doing, and we found it to be quite successful with various types of improvements, not whole-scale facade replacements, but enough to make a building a little more attractive to do business at. And we've got a few examples now all over our Main Street area.
And I think you had mentioned too, they're putting in a parapet, right?
Yes.
To mask the rooftop mechanicals.
Yes, so what you see above the row of lighting and the awnings is a new parapet that's going to go in. The work is actually under construction as we speak.
And some of the reinforcement, like you're seeing the stone materials there on the base, that ties into some of what we saw on the florist. So there's difference, but also you start to see some uniformity in some of this, which is great. Another strategy is the beautification.
Excuse me, just out of curiosity, what other facade improvements?
I don't have exact addresses, but there are a couple of buildings along South Old Rand Road that received new paint on their facades. Then we had a couple of awnings
So
replaced.
the Stomping grounds is?
Stomping
that one?
grounds is,
Scoreboard.
scoreboard is one example, so. Very, very basic, projects that help, kind of like prim up some of the, buildings.
And visuals go a long way with communicating that. And so too, that's one opportunity we see is, you know, when you sit down to have those conversations of the public-private balance there, if you can help them along in that vision of you know, the patio area or lighting or what have you.
If I may. I think this is an important issue, and I think something that we've brought up as a commission when we brought up the fact that for a number of years, we've gotten away from seeing materials. And I know that, Hilda, you just brought it up in our last meeting last week. And I think this is an opportunity to say, you know what, we have to get back to that. Because now we're hearing it from the planners saying, you know what, you should be doing this. And we're saying, we'd love to. But our hands are a little bit tied at times because unless a petitioner brings in the materials for us to see and we've gotten away from that, we have nothing to judge. And even in the last project, there were some things that they didn't even have renderings of. So this is an important issue that I'm going to bring up again to say, you know what, I think it's time to start telling the petitioners, start bringing in a sample of the brick, the color, the facade, the paint. For whatever reason, and I don't know, I don't have the answers to why we went away from that, but it has been a long time. And I remember when we did have that opportunity, we had that opportunity to do exactly what you're suggesting. So, being that this is some of the recommendation you're coming, I'm going to say we've got to have it back. And we've asked for that in the past. We've been asking it for almost a year now, and it still doesn't come before us. So they may find it as inconvenient, but it's something that we have to say, if we're going to do our due diligence and the planners are saying that we need to do this, then we need the teeth to be able to do that.
Yeah, I'd say there's, having done development review as well, there's that fine balance where you can't tell someone too much, right? But that's the beauty of guidelines, is you can provide the guidance, hey, we love these materials, you know, we want to steer away from EFIS, what have you. I don't know what it is. But, and then that also kind of avoids the conversation of getting into the weeds on color and whatnot. So it provides a nice balance of things in our experience.
And it does with us too. I mean, I remember when Dairy Queen came, and it wasn't going to be the color it is now. And we suggested certain things, and they went to that direction. Or we suggested a different color brick that was going to be more uniform to what we would like to have. We went away from the Alpine look, for God's sakes. Thank you. For a reason. So if we have those things, I mean, that's why we are up here, you know?
Yeah.
We have people that are in construction that understand the dynamics. So we need to have that brought back. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, so shifting from the goal on the facade improvement program, the next one that we wanted to cite was the beautification strategy for incremental enhancements. So, you know, I cited here, this is a parklet, like an outdoor little dining area in the space of a parking space, which Parklet Day is September 21st, I think. They made a day about it. You can do fun programs about it. But this, again, really hits on public-private partnerships. But there's opportunities that are also within the village's control. Where can festoon lighting go, or those buffers? I highlighted a berm, but buffers between where you walk and where you drive, very helpful, very nice. They make you feel safe, and especially if you're going to be having patios under the cantilevers, is there any depth to do something there? I don't know, but these are the areas that you can start to flag for kind of the lower hanging fruit of beautification. I cited this little pedway on the bottom left, the alleyway. I'm a sucker for alleys. I just love the ways in which you can program them. Now, mind you, if cars are going through them, that's not what you want to program for. But alleys can be activated in different ways. One, you can test things out for a temporary standpoint, right? So if you want to do it during Miracle on Main or something and program that space in a unique way, and maybe you do, or temporary can take on a mural, right? Cars can still go through, murals go up. So there's a number of different ways, and if over time you determine a way where, hey, this can be a permanent little people space, you've tested some things. Festoon lighting, especially here, could really, anyways, I could go on. Alleys. We've seen changes with the post-COVID environment. Walk-up windows are one. It's another way to activate the streetscape. That's my mom and sister. This was a neighborhood in San Francisco, a little kind of grocer eatery that you walk up to. But again, I talk about that setback with design guidelines and stepping things back a bit. It provides room for things like this. You want that uniform street wall, but you want the streetscape to be engaging. Where can you put a sandwich board? Can you order a coffee from a window? Other elements like street paint. We know that there was a healthy appetite for activating parking lots, especially after COVID as part of the 2021 National Community Survey, and that continued as part of the recent one. And then the example on the bottom right actually is Wheaton, Illinois. They applied TIF funds to where you see the people eating outdoors there. They did a curb extension where that was the roadway there. And they had enough right-of-way where they were able to bring out the curb, effectively creating a really, really wide sidewalk there. It's right across from the train, so they put in these little trestle planters, and they have lighting going above. These are kind of the long-term vision. So we spent a lot of time discussing at the last meeting, how do we get to where we want to go with businesses coming in? I see streetscape as a big step in that direction. A few other examples here. The top left is a pop-up putt-putt course, ping pong. The walls in parking lots can be beautified in different ways, so a lot of different creative ways to do some of that beautification. We'll be creating a Main Street area framework plan. So within the comprehensive plan, there'll be a visual overview of where we see the opportunities for some of these. We started to do some of that, starting from like the top left, looking at seasonal activations here with Breezewald. The area where Stomping Grounds is, can you engage with the property owners over there to enhance the outdoor seating, the dining, the lighting? That little pedestrian alley that I just hit on, and then that whole, it's kind of like centers of gravity, right? You see these radiating circles. How does the energy of the Main Street and Old Rand intersection relate and carry up to these other areas, and then out to Route 22? And so this is just a starter talking point that we engaged with staff on, but it starts to show, how we start to see some of the recommendations coming together. This is another example of bump outs. We call them bump outs. We get very familiar with the terminology in planning, but it's worth explaining. Is bump outs is basically at corners, you literally bump out the corner infrastructure so that you have space for, again, outdoor dining. Here we have some modular seating. They're examples of how you could activate those corners and support the business environment. Infrastructure goes hand in hand with this. It was really important to talk to Mike Brown and his team. All of this needs to work together. These are long-term, multi-year kind of phases in constructions and engineering. So understanding how our goals with the streetscape and roadways and sidewalks relates to the big picture is absolutely essential. You can't frost a cake unless it's baked, and that's the first step. So real quick, I just wanted to highlight two case studies. On the left is downtown Wilmette, and on the right is downtown Winnetka. These are two different streetscapes that Tesca urban design team supported, and they arrived at it in different ways. The Wilmette actually undertook some aggressive funding from grants. So thinking strategically how we can apply for grants. These are expensive projects. So it's ITEP, you see it down there at the bottom, but they were basically able to offset their cost in half by applying for these grants. These are big projects too. So how, again, the question earlier, how do we pay for this is absolutely an essential question. And there's some key grants that we would want to flag as part of that. You can also see the phases of implementation. These are carried out over multi-years, and they actually did their construction during COVID, which was really interesting. But they focused in on the bump outs. This is kind of restaurant row here, so it was really important for them to have low-level lighting, kind of creates a ceiling, and they actually integrated curved seating as part of the planters that you see there. They have a village green that's kind of, there's some similarities to the different infrastructure here in Lake Zurich. They do a lot of concerts out there. And so how you think about these spaces in terms of it's not one season, it's not daytime, it's not evening, it's all the things. And how do you program it? How do you provide the hookups for different vendors? You know, is there a lawn space? Is it accessible? There's a lot of different factors to think about. And Winnetka's downtown streetscape, they went a more traditional route. You know, you see more of the curbed planters design, but just wanted to highlight these. You know, the scope of work really hits on the depth of what streetscape entails in terms of the utility, the wayfinding, pavement plantings, bump outs, all the things. Okay, I'm going to pause soon if there's questions right after this one. But first, just to touch on a big part of the community and places section is also on housing. And we heard both sides in the input we received, which is people want to have housing that they can move into, young couples who want to move back to Lake Zurich, and people want to downsize, and then everything in between. And then you have affordability, and you know, there's all the things in today's market. But it was important to cover those. The graphic on the left hits on a broad range of types of houses. And so looking at the existing housing stock in Lake Zurich, it was really important that that's maintained. So we're looking to programs and incentives there. Again, the design guidelines can hit on that. So you have another major redevelopment. What does that look like for different types of housing? You know, what's the scale? What's the step backs once you get to the second or third story so it doesn't feel so massive, or things like that. Encouraging different ways to do this will take place as part of the studies on infill and special areas too, if that's going to be proposed. And one thing that, this is in the Main Street area, but it stood out to me is, you know, a lot of Main Street is one story. So we call it feet on the street when you put upper story units above there. That helps support the businesses. And so as redevelopment occurs, as development gaps start to be filled in, we definitely recommend that these buildings be 2 stories. There's always those exceptions, and the cute 1 stories that should just always stay that 1 story. The barber shops, or, you know, it's special, but this is a very big economic development piece that ties in housing and those stories above in Main Street. Design guidelines will be addressed. Smaller ranch homes, cottage-style homes, downsizing, young couple templates were part of the focus there, and that's what these 2 photos just kind of touch on. And so with that, before I go into programming and partnerships, I want to pause briefly. That was a lot. Is there any questions, topics that you want to ask or discuss before we move on?
Commissioners, while we have a pause, any question? Jake?
Sure. I think I think kind of tacit in your presentation. I feel like you guys have an order of operations, how these things fit together that hasn't been explicitly pulled out. So I'd just be curious to get your thoughts on like, obviously all of these fit together in a certain way, but is it kind of like PEMDAS, like you have to start with one and it kind of gets a momentum leading into another for those placemaking and houses? I'm just curious if you could pull that out for us a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. The phasing part of the streetscape and understanding what the right-of-way is, for example, is step one. This would be a in-depth next step study. I always hate being the planner that says, hey, you need another plan, but it's a big one, and I'm not an urban designer, but we work with them, and we chatted with Manhard, the engineering team you all work with. That's kind of the next step, getting into what is the engineering of how all of these fit together to, where do these bump outs occur? How wide is the sidewalk going to be? Where is electric hookups? It's kind of the underground element. From there, there's other elements that can occur in tangent and along the way. So those beautification strategies, right? A mural certainly is something that can happen if redevelopment isn't going to occur. Creative crosswalks can happen in areas where the streetscape isn't so much impacted. I think that the wayfinding and signage component is also important. You go back to the made you look factor of coming down these corridors. I would want to start to think through what is the wayfinding system. A lot of communities do that in tangent with streetscape because it's infrastructure, it has to go. So that's kind of the starter element. From there too, flagging, infill properties, those type of things would go in the gaps thereafter, but that's kind of the first point. Now the implementation plan will phase this out. It will have a very structured, we're kind of at the, bird's eye view of all these things now. We also need to get into the weeds on how that shakes out specifically. When are grants coming available? When do you need to apply for them? We talked a bit about that with the Public Works team too. Does that help a little? Okay.
Do you have a question at this
Well,
juncture?
I guess, strategically, we can, embrace a lot of this, and as much as possible, do what we can when we approve new ventures, new ideas, new, recommendations, new buildings, new businesses, all of that is great. But there's also a lot of existing that really doesn't meet in any way, shape, or form the spirit of what we're trying to do here. And I don't know what, if any, control we have over that. We've talked about, there are businesses that have been there for 5, 6, 7 years, and they still have temporary signage. Some of the permanent signs just aren't attractive anymore, and it's kind of a hodgepodge. So putting in, little areas of beauty, but then still allowing the existing to stay, just, to me, doesn't make sense. But I don't know where we can go with that part, because there's the existing that I think also needs to be part of this plan. And how does that happen? They're grandfathered in many instances. Things are the way they are. Some of the signage are, leaves a lot to be desired.
I can say first, that's to a T, the public-private partnership umbrella. And the best path forward there is communication, transparency, programs that can facilitate cost sharing, like the facade improvement program. If you want to go down the route of supporting creative blade signage, preparing communication materials, scheduling meetings or workshop sessions, and going to those property owners and sitting down and saying, hey, this is something we want to support. Communication is, it's a private development, you don't have control. These are also long-term phased components. That will take time. So there's it's the time, facilitation, communication. And Sarosh, I don't know if
Yeah,
you're going to
just one more thing I'd add, that one of the important parts that Aaron talked about is the framework plan that they're putting together, which creates a framework, almost envision it as a wireframe around the existing buildings that are there, which means that you give them the limits to what an existing building can be added onto or replaced with. And in the event, over time, when buildings reach their the point of maturity where they do need major replacement or a facade improvement, or like we saw in the one example where a parapet is being added, they stay within that framework, but then work into what the new aspirations that we are adding to the plan will be. So say, for instance, a building needs a major overhaul, a building that's, say, on the corner that needs to be demolished and replaced. The framework plan then gives the owner an idea as to how far within that wireframe they can construct their building, because that wireframe addresses not just that property, but the entire line of properties along that street to maintain that street wall. And then coming to more detailed aspects of a building such as signage, we do require that non-conforming signs, if removed or if damaged, have to be replaced with conforming signs. So if there are signs that are grandfathered in, yes, they can be maintained so long as they're not removed, first of all, but they can be refaced. In many cases, when owners come back saying, well, the structure is completely shot, then we mandate that they follow the current requirements of signage. And so we've been doing that very slowly. A number of signs have just been refaced, so their original non-conforming structure still remains, but we at least see an upgraded face on that sign. So we're working very slowly. There are certain rights that and flexibility that we do offer properties, rather than simply mandating that if your sign's old, you have to replace it. We do say that if your sign, if you're, do you have an example of a temporary sign? Are you talking about?
Twigs, and clothing store next to the Jewel.
We do have time limits on those temporary signs, such as banners, flags, or temporary ground-mounted signs. It's only for permanent signs that we have the mandatory replacement if they are out of date or non-conforming. A temporary sign after its time period does have to be removed, so we will look into those.
I mean, they've been there for years now.
Okay, no, we definitely look into those particular ones that you're mentioning.
Cloth.
Yeah, no, we do have standards for the material of a sign as well, that it has to be a weatherproof, more permanent, long-lasting material.
I mean, it has to be a partnership. You've got to
Yes.
deal with the existing as well as what you want it to look like for the future, because otherwise you're gonna continue to just have a hodgepodge of really nice and, oh my, which doesn't help.
Right. And even going into the design guidelines, you can say, the feather signs you see a lot going up. They're
Oh,
the blow, yeah.
Yeah.
There's ways to encourage and discourage, or, ground floor transparency. Some businesses will plaster that with ads and stuff. You're like, no, I want to see in. There should be lighting and ambiance. It distills those. So that's a big opportunity and actually next step too. Yeah.
We have quite a robust sign ordinance that we are using to the advantage of the village too. I mean,
new signage is great.
yes. And also the fact that some of the old signage is very slowly being replaced as and when the owners come to us for a permit. So we use the sign ordinance. We've also kind of more or less mandated that because the sign ordinance is relatively new, that people follow the strict requirements of the sign ordinance rather than asking for flexibility or variances.
Well, Aaron, thank you for all you've told us already this evening. I know you have more to come, but the one thing I want to say is I think that the village has demonstrated certainly an eagerness, if you will, to see what your plan is for us, this comprehensive plan going forward, because some of the steps that have happened already within the village, you showed the visual to us of the sidewalk crossing at Breezewald, also at Sarah Adams. The amount of conversation that those two crossings generated was just amazing. And we saw the success of Sunset Pavilion, the partnership that was. And then you talk about the visual aspects. The mural on Vault 232, as it progressed, it started out with one thing with the, together, and then we had all the other thing come up. People were all up taking the pictures with it and everything. So it generates enthusiasm to see that. So as this plan moves forward and we have all the different ideas that you're talking about, there is I think it's been shown, we're gonna see positive benefit from it because the steps we've taken have already done that. So if we can incorporate something more into it in terms of the process, I think everyone's gonna be behind it. We certainly are.
Yeah, it's been inspiring to see the real-time implementation of things and the enthusiasm.
Okay, Sean, something at this point, check in?
Yeah, a couple things. Number one, I had to look up what busking was again, so
Yeah.
I appreciate you bringing that term to the table. I hopefully won't forget next time.
It doesn't sound like what it is.
No,
I
not
agree.
at all. I'm like, I knew that you told us before, but it still did not click. Placemaking and wayfinding signage makes a lot of sense, especially along 22 and Rand, just trying to drive people to where we want them to be. Even folks passing through on their commute, they're not going to take a hard right away, but if they see the signage day after day, they might get curious over time. And so thought that made a lot of sense. Wanted to echo Commissioner Castillo's comments regarding the design guidelines. Completely agree. Would love that to be within our purview. I know there's allowed building materials, and being able to see those certainly would help, but without the guidelines, you're making decisions in a vacuum, and you're worried about setting precedent. You're worried about, pushing your own personal standards, and so having a widely adopted, accepted design standard for what things could look like, should look like, massing, things like that, I think is a huge piece of what's missing here. And frankly, it throws me for a loop every time we see something that's kind of out of the ordinary here. I don't know how to treat it. The materials are allowed, we could pass it. It's a matter of personal preference, and so having those guidelines, I think, are critical for me, certainly, but I think for the village going forward. I like the comment about the special third places, the example that was used in Jefferson Park. That's actually where my parents live currently. So I thought that was a fun idea for Main Street, cutting down on curb cuts in general, just trying to minimize the interference on pedestrian traffic by autos, I think will be critical, especially for areas where we want to have more pedestrian traffic, want it to be pedestrian centric. The Main Street area framework plan, I guess I do have a question. So will that have massing guidelines as well? I mean, especially as we're talking about some of these big village-owned parcels, trying to drive more development down to Main Street. Going back to my comments about design guidelines, it would be nice to have kind of a consensus, or at least a starting point for what we think is an appropriate massing along the lakefront area.
Yes, yeah. So the framework plan will be an aerial perspective citing the main focus areas. There's going to be special areas that then hone in a layer deeper on that. So those specific sites, absolutely. And I was even chatting with our land planning team today about that. And we've talked about the balance of parking and things, but yes, what height makes sense there? You look over at the location at Route 22 and Old Main, right? That one right across from Ace Hardware. And I asked Nick Patera in our office, I'm like, how high would a building have to be here so you could see the lake? And so, and then you think about that kind of component. Is it a reality or is it not? You don't want to go up massive. But so yes, we are thinking through those, and those do get into the special area plans where we're not going to say, hey, this is what you need to develop, but these are the context of what would be appropriate and where we see opportunity given the space, the context, the environment. Yeah. And the design guidelines are another project, but as part of this, we're going to fold in a layer of that as part of those character districts we talked about, so that there's predictability there too.
And so I guess last comment is on housing, and just top of mind, given a couple of things that we've seen over the last year or so. But one of the things that folks that get public testimony about housing proposals in their neighborhood, they immediately go to, a statement on the village website related to, the overall purpose of the zoning code, yada, 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 is comprised principally of well-maintained single-family residential neighborhoods. And folks can construe that in a number of different ways. And so when we look at kind of marrying the old with the new, will you have a recommendation about what that mix should look like if we want to achieve the desired results, especially if we're looking at getting more commercial in the Main Street area and other places, and we want folks to be patrons of those establishments, thinking through, does the village need more people? Are we targeting people outside of the village? Where are these people coming from, I guess, in order to create the ideal mix that we're gonna target as a result of this plan?
Yeah. I mean, you're a built-out community, right? There's only so many places for development to occur. Where that occurs, context. So that's why I brought up the example on Main Street. I think it's a really easy one for folks to understand in the sense of it's a different type of unit to live upstairs from a business, right? Not everyone wants to do it. I did it at one point. I'm past those days. But it's also vitality to your business district. And, young people coming out of college, they might love to rent an apartment above a unit in Main Street. It's at a price point where maybe they can rent. They aren't at a point of buying, right? So rental options are important for people who are dipping their feet into the market, or maybe empty nesters in a different setting, right? Who just don't want to have different costs involved. The location of other thought process, so we're looking at some of annexation potential on Rand, if it makes sense to grow. It might not, but if the village decides to, what is that land use type that would make sense there? And that might be those cottage-style development homes that are not super dense, but kind of cater to both empty nesters and young couples, are at a price point that are the kind of ranch style. Another example's local example like Deer Park Crossing caters to that, right? Young people live there as well as the former mayor. It's got rental and buying opportunities. So there's one aspect to recognize, which is from the data, the median age in Lake Zurich is higher than the county. You have opportunity to provide spaces for younger folks to move in over, so that is an opportunity, and we see that in the data too. And then you need to understand context, right? Where does this make sense? Where is all those elements of massing and height? You want things to complement each other and work in unison. So the special area plans, infill development, that focus of bringing what we learned from what people want will be sorted out as part of that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good question, John. Scott?
You answered a lot of them already, but I guess more for you, Sarosh, and maybe, more people who have been on the commission for a little while longer. How does the practicality of this work? I mean, do these get amended into ordinances? Like we're talking about, I know there's signage ordinances and stuff, but what about design details and materials that we're talking about? Does that all kind of get from a recommendation from the, the planning team into different village ordinances? Is that kind of how this works, or how do we get to that point?
In large part, yes, because what the comprehensive plan is doing is giving the village guidance on how it should implement its housing, its street development, its various character districts. And so we will create standards that developments or whatever project needs to meet. So whether it becomes a requirement versus a standard, which can then be looked at by the Plan Commission during the proposal of a project, that would ultimately have to be determined. But yes, a lot of it will get codified. There is a way in which a number of communities have what we call unified development ordinances, where they take the comprehensive plan and the zoning code and combine them into a blend of the guidance and the requirements, so that you can then move forward in implementing them. Because trying to make every single standard a requirement may not be feasible or even recommended. But using the guidance that you have from the comprehensive plan and then certain standards that you want to absolutely implement, that would be the way to go.
Yeah,
So
so
that,
I'm-
we haven't gotten to that stage yet, but that's what, yes, we
Gotcha,
will be
okay,
looking
all
at.
right, that was my main
Mhm.
question as all this stuff was going
Yeah.
on.
Yeah, and I would guess the zoning code now has a statement in there that the zoning code should reinforce and celebrate the spirit of the comprehensive plan. There's
exactly.
cross-references typically, so that when the comprehensive plan is adopted, you can still, even if they're not codified, say, hey, these are our guidelines, and, you know, these are what we recommend. Codifying it is that next layer of requiring it, which I agree with Sarosh. Sometimes you want a little wiggle room, right? You want to be able to have those conversations.
Well, and allow them some flexibility to still be
Absolutely.
unique to
Right.
whatever they're trying to do, but fit within the overall plan.
But I
Yeah.
think the beauty of the comprehensive plan that we're looking at now is not gonna just be recommendations on land use, which our current comprehensive plan makes. I think we're looking at far greater aspects of development in addition to land use, such as streetscape, street definition, materials, colors, textures, character, as they're talking about. So this comprehensive plan is unique in the sense that we will be looking at a more holistic view of how
What
development
Lake
takes
Zurich's
place.
gonna look like.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
absolutely.
Okay. That was really my main questions.
Great.
Thank you.
We'll have a whole section on the Alpine theme.
All right.
Antonio?
Thank you. So, yeah, I just wanted to chime in, Scott. There's no ordinance. This is one of the, as an example, if we wanted to use an example, you can take a look at Lifetime. Lifetime came to us as a 3-story building. We didn't really like what was there. So it got adjusted and it conformed to where we went. The ordinance isn't there. This is a suggestive plan. That's what we have. It's a suggestive plan based on what we in turn can see up here. That's why when I mentioned before that the Alpine look kind of was phased out because nobody really liked it anyways. And it was complicated. And that's why the materials are important for us to see so that we can see colors that go into a certain area. I brought up the Dairy Queen. As simple as that seemed, it really wasn't, because originally it wasn't going to be that color. It was going to be a very different color. And then there are those petitioners come and say, hey, corporate says. And then, of course, we say, no, that's not really true, because you can go to Wilmette, you can go to Winnetka, you can go to Bannockburn. Bannockburn, you go to a McDonald's, and it doesn't look like any McDonald's that we've seen, because Bannockburn says, you want to come here? Here's what it's got to look like. So it's not an ordinance, it's a suggestion. We take a look at how it fits into where it's going to go, and then we go from there. So that's, I just wanted to kind of bring that up again.
It's kind of collaborative.
Exactly, exactly. We want it to be collaborative, kind of like the project that we sent back because of the density. Hey, you know what? This isn't going to work. You want us to say, no, we can do that. You want us to say, yes, then bring something else. So you get to that conversation. I agree that you said communication is key. So you want to get to that communication so that they understand what we're looking at. We have a great plan that looks fabulous, and we're saying, hey, can you fit in here? If not, what can you do? So that we can have sidewalks, which a lot of them say, I don't want sidewalks. Now you're going to have wider sidewalks. You got all these different things. But we have that ability based, because remember, we are planning and zoning. So that's really where that comes from. So I have a question. So we've talked a lot about the downtown area. But one of the things that you talked about earlier in your presentation was about entranceways. And we basically have 3 entranceways here to the village, right? We have Quentin and 22. We've got Cuba and Rand. And then we've got Miller and Rand, basically. Those are our 3 biggest things, right? So for me, when I take a ride and I go through places like Wheeling, and I see the massive entryway that they have on Milwaukee Avenue and Dundee, I believe, waterfalls, is saying, welcome to Wheeling. It's awesome. So for me, it can't just be about, hey, you're coming into downtown Lake Zurich. I want something, at those entrances that say you're coming into Lake Zurich, which also has this. So that's something that I would like to see in the plan, that gateway that leads us in. We've made a big issue at Quentin and 22 about what we don't want on the southwest corner, specifically because it is one of our gateways. And you've got the Marianos. So if there was some huge, whatever kind of signage it's going to be, all right? Now, I get the ones that are on Rand, they're going to be a little bit, different. But at least that one, because that's coming in from the east. But then also have some type of really nice signage, not just some wood sign that says, hey, welcome to Lake Zurich. That's about yay big. And you
That's
kind of,
the IDOT version.
seriously, that's like, and,
Yeah.
and the same thing holds true when you go to Port Clinton. They're downtown, right? That's Highland Park, right? And then you see the Wilmets and you see the Winnetkas and you see the Lake Forests. They welcome you as you come in to that town first, then to the downtown. So that's something else that, for me, in this plan, we have to look at those things as well. That says we're embracing you to come to our community, because when we take a look at the things you're suggesting, housing and other people coming in, whether they be empty nesters or the young people, that they're not just going to live downtown. They're going to live on the outskirts. And it's, what does that look like when I invite people to come into my town? I mean, this is really what Deer Park has, except they made it into a mall. But when you come into Deer Park and you see that mall that's theirs, from the day they opened it, and Ray Charles was the guy who was singing to open it up, and how they do all these activities and movie night and this and that, you're in Deer Park. So, I mean, those are the things that, for me, when you got to this part at least, we're missing, because I want to see that entryway as well.
Yeah, and I 100% agree with you. We have that corner of Quinton. It's in our special area plans. How we'll address that, and we don't have imagery for that yet, but it hits on exactly what you're talking about, is what is the playscape of what we can do, right? IDOT, they don't allow even lighting, I think. It's very, very limited. You can't distract. Everything distracts. So, and then where are those unique opportunities where there's infill development and you want a flag? This would be ideal for public art. I mean, the example you brought up, that's massive, right? And it really takes up a large area of the corner. What are those opportunities in Lake Zurich? And we'll flag those. And then, where you go into Main Street and it's not an IDOT right-of-way, that's where you can put an arch over the street if you wanted. There's limited opportunities for that. And maybe it's not an arch. Maybe you want to do something else. But we'll flag inspiration based on that setting. And it's good to hear the example you shared. If there's other examples you all see, send them on over to Sarosh and send them to me. Yeah.
Okay, good, thanks. Okay, Aaron.
We will charge forward. Good? Yep. Ryan is patiently waiting. A lot to cover still. Okay, let's flip back to our presentation here. Okay, so programming, partnerships, and local economy. This section of the plan hits on, well, as you can see, what you're already doing amazingly great at. We've heard so much about the existing events, and we were lucky enough to set up next to the pickle guy at the farmer's market and got free pickles. But this is mainly focused on the pop-up markets, the celebrations programming, lots of opportunity, lots of just continuing that momentum, and then a few brick and mortar components. These are just some of the ideas that have come up over the course of things, everything, live music, dancing, salsa, definite love for everything that's going on. So kudos to everyone behind the scenes planning and volunteering at those. Lake Walk, this was an idea from our student group, and really focusing the brand and identity of Lake Zurich around there. Water taxi was one that I think we brought up at a prior meeting, but the idea of, hey, can there be a once-a-year little water taxi event that could bring you from point A to point B, Bob, or Sunset Pavilion, or what have you. We also heard about the focus on culture, and this came up in the community survey because there was a depth of people who spoke another language at home, right? We asked that question. And Diwali celebration was an idea that many of the high school students shared, which is about joy and color and light, and there's lots of opportunity there. Street food and chalk art, and so, and then I go and see you're already implementing these ideas. I just went on the website, I emailed Sarosh and Kyle about this, because I was like, have they been following the plan? You have Thursday evenings and you're doing Latin dancing and music. So I don't know, I wanna know, is this a happy mistake or everyone's listening in Lake Zurich, which is amazing. All right, so the goals on arts, culture, and year-round activities. Support visible public art. So we think about that example of busking, right? Which happens. That happens at Sunset Pavilion, acoustic music. Where else can it happen? Creative placemaking, pop-up experiences. That's what really came through with outreach is when you see it, you believe it, you engage with it. So visible public art and experiences, outdoor performances, seasonal activations, a variety of accessible indoor activities for kids and teens. This is a big one I want to hit on. It came up a lot of mom wishes at workshops as well as from the kids, but these were some of the ideas: bowling, mini golf, laser tag, arcade, simulator sports, feasibility for indoor pool, aquatic center, sports facility, and escape room I touch on because did you know you can order an escape room package and then it tells you how to set it all up? If you have a vacant space, something to think about. They actually send you those. And then celebrating local arts and cultural opportunities. These are a few images that kind of bring that home, you know, the seasonal things to kind of test out. You can see what people like. Ping pong in the park. How do you weatherproof some of these is another thing to think about. Cornhole competitions. The bottom right example, a paint and sip. This is an example from New Zealand. But you have a lot of arts in Main Street now. All the utility boxes are painted. So how can we draw on this inspiration in different ways? And then continuing to lean into the seasonal activations, the purple plunge and all-season programming. What other types of infrastructure can we think about to make those more enjoyable? I brought up the example of berming. Evergreens, really great at blocking wind. If you're going to be doing winter activations in a set area, think about that. Trees take time to grow, but once they're big, they really help with that component. This is an event in Minneapolis, an art shanty project that's held on a frozen lake. Obviously want to make sure that's safe with temperatures increasing and all that. I just like how intense this person looks curling, but these are more programming concepts. So curling, if you're not familiar, it's an Olympic sport. There's a restaurant, brewery, bar in Chicago that does a pop-up curling every winter. It's called Kaiser Tiger. It's fairly, you look like, have you done it? Yeah. Nice. All right. It's fairly, you think about those low budget, big win things, and it's an economic driver. People pay to reserve these spots. They're fun. Teens can do it. Parents can do it. All ages, as long as you're safe on ice. You get a little broom. The 3D art is a big win. We see that coming up a lot in street fests. And then integrating play spaces with art. You think about people taking photos and these, you know, people taking photos of the murals. Where are people playing too? That's my little dude, Beck. And that mural went up, I want to say 2 years ago in Chicago, and we see it all over our local Instagram. So. And then transparency, communication. This has come through loud and clear that this is really already taking place here. It came through in the survey. People were really complimentary of the efforts of staff and working together, continuing those partnerships, but recognizing that this is not the village's, the staff, the commission's, the board's plan. This is the community's plan, right? We all need to put hands on deck to make this happen. So how can we expand those partnerships to alleviate some of the pressure that's on, you know, the Parks Department to host these events, the volunteer, building that volunteerism. And then also private service providers. Again, long-range plan, looking at bringing in fiber optic internet. This came up at our first meeting, but that hybrid culture of working and just being able to facilitate fast internet is definitely something that we want to look to for the future. I put this up because for folks who are tuning in, we heard about people wanting to volunteer. If folks aren't aware, there is a portal on the village website where you can sign up for the farmers markets, Rock the Block. It's really important to expand that base of volunteers because it's a limited group. And so I encourage folks, if they're tuning in, to scan this and join the list of helpers. And then the last, the example I wanted to highlight here, this is called Cycling Without Age programs. Is anyone familiar with this one? It started in Denmark, but Cycling Without Age program provides free rides to seniors on, they're called trishaws. They're kind of like rickshaws, what you see there. And it's a way to get seniors, or I don't know if they have an age limit, if you just wanted to book it anyways, but to get them out and about and help that mental health and well-being. McHenry, Illinois just started a local chapter. ActiveTrans.org has a lot of recommendations if you wanted to start that here, how to do it. It's great from all the reading on it. Trishaws cost about $10,000. There's a lot of different good information on ActiveTrans. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Ryan because I've been talking a lot.
Excellent. All right. Thank you, everyone. My name is Ryan Peterson. I'm a senior planner for Epstein. Fortunate enough to be on Tessa's team, mostly looking at connectivity, mobility, and accessibility. A little dissimilar from Aaron's style. Feel free to ask questions as we go. Some of these are going to be more in depth. So please ask, and I'm happy to answer them, as they come up. So, couple topics that I want to hit on in my presentation. First and foremost, active transportation concerns. Where is there currently a lack of safety? Where is there currently a lack of walkability and bikeability within Lake Zurich? Where are there development opportunities and what is our strategy? A few priority projects that we looked at when we implemented that strategy and started looking at some of these roadways, looking at walkability, and then I'm going to try to convince you all that universal mobility here in Lake Zurich is the way to go. And so hopefully, we have some questions and good discussion along the way as well. Some of the mobility goals that were laid out, our streets are safe for all transportation modes, ages, and abilities. There's a saying out there that your society has to walk as slow as the slowest walking member. I like to adapt that to transportation networks, is that your transportation network is only as good as those who can access it, and if that's not the slowest member, figuratively, of your society or your community, then you don't have a good transportation network. Your network has to be accessible and utilized by everyone, individuals with disabilities, people with mobility issues, and then beginner bicyclists. It has to run the gamut, so everyone has to be able to access it. Lake Zurich residents do not rely only on a single occupancy vehicle for all transportation needs. I am not here to tell you that you need to go get rid of your car and now commute by bike exclusively, but I am here to tell you that 50% of all trips are under 5 miles, and those are very easily convertible if you have a safe, comfortable, cost-effective, and efficient way to get around other than in a car. And so that was kind of our North Star for mobility goals. And then as we look at bicycle and pedestrian goals, the three kind of action statements that we're looking at for these two topics are Lake Zurich has a connected sidewalk and trail network that allows people to safely walk, bike, and roll to local and regional destinations, the libraries, the schools, the stores. Data also shows us that bicyclists and pedestrians spend more on average per trip at grocery stores, bars, and restaurants. And so there is a dollar and cents and economic incentive to increasing your bicycle and pedestrian networks as well, not just for recreation and leisure too. Streetscapes along main thoroughfares across the village are active and inviting, And then finally, residents and visitors have easy recreational access to the lake, parks, and open space via walking and bike paths. So, with that in mind, I want to take a look back at like what brought us to some of these conclusions. This is a map of the village. Superimposed or overlaid on that is the bicycle level of service, which is a planning tool. It takes in consideration traffic volume, roadway width, traffic speeds, and it gives you a general comfort level of how safe and comfortable it would be to ride on any given roadway. This is an IDOT kind of metric that I like to use. The colors really kind of aren't showing up as well as I would have liked, but most of the village is that kind of that burnt orange color, which means that it's caution advised, indicating a potentially an unsafe and overall uncomfortable bicycling environment within Lake Zurich. So just curious, anyone here a bicyclist at all? Anyone routinely do that? You know, I have biked here before, grew up in Cary myself, and I would bike around the area, and it wasn't my favorite place to bike, quite honestly. And so with some of these recommendations, we want to get into how can we make that safer, more comfortable, more inviting for all ages and abilities.
So Ryan, is there a way to make all the streets flat?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
You know what? Once
that
I
would
figure
improve-
that out,
It would
yeah.
improve for me greatly if you could do that.
Once I figure that out, I'm going to be making millions, I swear.
All right.
Yeah, once
Oh,
I can
there
once
you
I can get rid of all elevations everywhere, it's just, yeah, it'll be easier that way. Looking at crash analysis, we took a look at where crashes are happening, why they're happening, and then have some conclusions on hotspots. Not surprisingly, most of the crashes are focused on the high volume roadways, higher speed roadways, not typically under the village's jurisdiction, but still good to keep in mind. What was very interesting to us was that most of the crashes are happening on dry road surfaces under good lighting. And so that leads us to believe that a lot of these are based on infrastructure changes or infrastructure changes that should be happening and driver behavior that can hopefully be corrected through further upgrades and enhancements, infrastructure policy and programming wise. So we took all these considerations into the kind of factored into our network design, also a lot of feedback from where people want to bike and walk, and we came up with this draft network design. The green lines, the green dotted lines are recommended facilities. The solid green lines, like you see on Quinn Road, are existing regional trails. And so we broke it down into two categories, off-street and on-street recommendations. The off-street recommendations are encompassed by, off-street recommendations are shared use paths or trails. And so along some of the major roadways, that's what we're recommending. It's really not appropriate to put a bike lane on something like South Rand Road or any of the state roadways going through Lake Zurich, so we want to move that off the street. The on-street recommendations, though, are bike lanes, your typical bike lanes, 5 feet wide, your buffered bike lanes, which are 5 feet wide and then a 3-foot buffer, your curb-protected bike lanes, which are your 5-foot bike lane plus a 3-foot curb, and then you also have just marked bike routes, which are just signed and typically have some kind of pavement marking. And so those are what encompasses those categories. So I want to pause here. Any questions on this network build out or further elaboration needed?
So one of the problems that I see here is that you indicated that we don't want to have it on Rand Road, which I agree. But you do have a significant amount of the village that is on the west side of Rand Road. And there is no way to cross over onto the east side. And so that becomes detrimental. Also, we do have a bike lane, interestingly enough, that is striped on Long Grove Road. But every bicyclist comes down Cuba. Sunday, Saturday, I mean, they come in droves, 25, 50 at a time. Yet the road is marked just a little bit south of there on Long Grove Road. They never use it. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I have to see is to make sure that we have some type of adherence to the bike lanes that are there, because they don't follow them. They'll follow what they want to follow. And two, there has to be a way of getting the west side of Lake Zurich, which happens to be where I live, and others, to be able to get over onto the other side, the east side, and then continue on. And that becomes very complicated because there are no sidewalks. And it's amazing at how many times I have seen bicyclists on Rand Road, on Route 12. It's just amazing to me. So I just want to make sure I throw that into the mix.
Yeah, no, those are very good points, and I appreciate you bringing that up. So there's typically three big things to change someone's behavior to really reroute them: convenience, safety, and comfort. If it's not convenient, they're not going to do it. So the convenience factor comes in with some of these bike lanes to nowhere. So even if you just have a bike lane striped somewhere, if it doesn't lead you anywhere or it's not connecting to a regional trail or a destination, a place you want to go, they're typically not going to use it. And then it has to be safe. It has to be comfortable. I'm not terribly familiar with the Long Grove Road one in particular, but I'll take a look at that again. But yeah, very good points. I appreciate that. Any other questions? Okay, excellent. And then two ones I want to point out that we've designated as priority projects are Oakwood Road and Rose Road, just north of East Main, and then the North Old Rand Road shared use path that we're proposing. So we broke those down and started creating some diagrams of what this might actually look like in practice. We really liked Oakwood Road. It has a really good north-south connectivity. It has limited driveways because they're mostly industrial up there, which just pose some safety issues with a lot of truck traffic. However, we're proposing to have a curb-protected bike lane. As you can see here, there would be about a 3-foot curb protecting you. And then when the bike lane meets a driveway, it would go to a dash markings, like here, with green pavement. And so you would lose the curb protection so that trucks could go in and out, but you would still have, an indication that this place is meant for bikes. Putting this on Oakwood also connects a lot of the residential neighborhoods in the southeast part of Lake Zurich to the high school and to a lot of other areas throughout, and then also to other communities north of Lake Zurich as well.
So, excuse me, Ryan, are you proposing that on both sides, east and west side of Oakwood?
That is correct, yes.
All right, so how much of the roadway does that take up in terms of what does that leave for the north and southbound truck traffic?
Yeah, so you'd still be able to fit about 11.5 or 12-foot travel lanes, which is more than adequate for truck traffic. We don't want to see anything less than 11 feet for a travel lane, and that we could certainly still accommodate all of these things and accomplish that goal.
Wide and oversized loads?
Yes, sir. We actually ran the turn radius on those, and it still accomplishes that.
Because I just have a hard time getting my mind around why you.
Excuse me, Mike, we can't, excuse me, we'll, if you want to make a comment, we'll still need you to come forward to the microphone so that everyone can hear what the question is. Mike, thank you. But I understand your concern. That's why I kind of brought it up.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And so there would need to be some curb work done on some of these driveways. However, to the gentleman's point, we did run the turn radius, and it meets all the qualifications for even oversized load trucks.
Okay.
Just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Excellent. And then the next one we have here is, so this is a diagram of North Old Rand Road. There's currently a sidewalk going along the roadway on the north side. We're proposing to increase that to a shared use path so that bicyclists could also travel along this roadway, enjoy some of the scenic views north of the lake, and then also create a really good connection between the downtown and the western parts of the village. Nothing would be touched on the south side of the road, and there would really no curbs would be touched or anything like that. And we could still fit in an 8-foot shared use path there. There would need to be some ADA improvements there, but we really like this as an east-west connection and wanted to mention it as a priority project within this plan. And then as we get into pedestrian needs, this is a map showing walkability within the village. As you can see, most of the village is rated more towards low walkability, some of those orange reddish colors. As you get into the downtown and some of the western parts, you do start to see a little bit more high walkability. But basically, we want to ensure with an aging community that everyone can get around regardless of their mobility levels. And the best way to do that is to increase the amount of sidewalks, increase the amount of safe crossings, increase the crossing infrastructure, and ensure that you can do everything you can as a village to make it safe to walk around their neighborhood or to stores nearby. And so with that in mind, our development strategy for the pedestrian network is universal mobility. And so the recommendation we're putting forward is that sidewalks or shared use paths are implemented on one side of every single road within the village. This would facilitate safe and convenient pedestrian movement, but also just allow for families, older adults, everyone to get around safely, comfortably, and then, as we were mentioning, get to some of these businesses, get to some of their neighbors, just attend events. Rather than just hopping in your car, you can actually walk there now. And so I think that is the synopsis of some of our mobility and bicycle and pedestrian recommendations. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ryan. I think to Antonio's concern about the west side part of the village, Countryside West and those other areas, Lexington, et cetera, is if looking at your map that you had up, obviously Rand Road, we said that's a state road, we're not going to want to implement that. But if we looked at Deer Path Road to become a major bike access point, because then Deer Path is a straight shot north, and you can connect then back over to Old Rand through Pheasant Ridge, and then use that as the safe arterial street to get to downtown.
Yeah,
Because it would take in for the kids for the school, for Sarah Adams Middle School North, if we made Deer Path a pedestrian, bike-friendly street. And I think it's wide enough to accommodate that.
Deer Path,
Deer
yes. Part of the problem that I see on the west side is you don't have a sidewalk that goes from the Walgreens west until you get over to just past the schools. There's nothing. That's one of the reasons why the buses pick up every kid in those neighborhoods, because there are no sidewalks unless you are internally. But if you have to cross the street, on Cuba, there are no sidewalks, none, all the way past the school. So if you're living in Countryside West or Chasewood, where I'm at, you walk internally, get to the rear of the school, got it. But then you have to cross Cuba, and then there's nothing going until you get all the way down to the street, I forget the name of the street, that leads right into the Walmart. That's the first time you have a sidewalk that actually goes south to north. It's tough. So that's something that, when we look at these things, the sidewalks are important, as well as the paths. And, it's interesting because when the DMV came before us, this was one of the issues that they had because all the drivers were going to be coming through that neighborhood. And on that neighborhood, people are walking on the grass. The bikers are on Cuba, and the DMV does their testing on Saturdays. That was a big issue that came to us at that time, if you recall.
Yeah.
And
because I live east of that, I recommended that.
yeah, exactly right. Yes. You just want to go to bone or beef. Anyways, I understand, but that's where that sidewalk is extremely important. However we do it, for that matter, if there was even a pedestrian bridge that crossed over from the west to the east at some point, because there's nothing even striped that you can cross where Old Rand Road and Rand split off. There's not even a crosswalk of any type.
Yeah, and that actually brings up a good point. Kind of after we've kind of laid out this development and this network, the next thing we're going to be baking in is intersection and crossing locations and improvement recommendations as well. So we'll solidify this network and then start baking in some of those tertiary things as well.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.
Any of the commissioners with questions for Ryan before we
No, I guess the only one I had was when you come back with crosswalk recommendations in some of these intersections, is bump outs gonna be part of that? Is going to kind of marry some of the other parts of the plan? Just thinking through, I mean, there's some massive issues, right? Connecting one side of the village to the other. There's also some micro issues. Like I live right off of Main Street. We're walking distance to May Whitney. Crossing over by Main and Church Road is not the funnest activity, especially with small children. So just wondering if that will be built into some of your recommendations. And are you tiering this? Like looking at funding over time, are you recommending that we start in one area and move towards the others, or kind of or what does that look like, I guess?
Yeah, it's a very good question. So to kind of go down the line of those questions, yes, we'll be marrying them with some of the other recommendations. Excuse me. So crosswalks, really, easy to kind of layer in with streetscape recommendations. We'll call out when there are opportunities to add bike lanes when you're resurfacing, things like that, so there's cost savings there and efficiencies that can be gained. And then, so we're looking at 20 years out for some of these recommendations for bike ped things, so it's not just gonna be, okay, you're doing this all next year. We'll phase it in and then prioritize based on the highest needs, based on safety, based on lack of connectivity. Some of the things you're mentioning, making sure you can connect east to west, north to south. And so, those will be prioritized. There will be a basic cost estimate with most of these, especially the priority projects. And then we'll have a list of funding opportunities and how to go after those, which projects are eligible for which, funding source and things like that.
Thank you. Anyone else?
And just addressing what Mike brought up for the industrial park, we've had a lot of projects come before us that are going into the industrial park, and I brought this up the last time at the last meeting, and Mike was very much in favor of the gentleman with the weightlifting business that was going in, and that's why I keep raising it, because of the truck traffic that's always there. And it seems to me that the industrial park has embraced some of that. So one of the things that, for me, at least listening to the plan, it would be that you just don't grab onto the suggestion. You take a look at how does it work in the industrial park, especially on Oakwood, so that you can marry both pedestrian, walkers, bikers, and truckers. I mean, it is, after all, it is an industrial park. I mean, and that's why it's kind of changed, and that's why I brought up that issue the last time, saying, wait, I thought we weren't bringing those type of businesses into the industrial park. But Mike indicated that they've accepted them, that they've started to embrace them. So we've got to find a way that we marry that even further. So from that standpoint, this isn't carte blanche. That's from me anyways, saying we're going to look to see how this works out the best, because the last thing we want is some bicyclist getting killed because some trucker was swaying out of the way of something else and just hit him. So that's the last thing we want to do. So I understand the plan, we see it, and like everything, it's a matter of collaboration and sometimes compromise.
In the spirit of that, can you speak to, America is a car culture, and undoing that car culture, everyone's constantly running into that. Can you speak to how to foster some of that support and collaborative decision-making, where it's like meeting the needs of the community, but also instilling, like, this is what Lake Zurich's pushing for, trying to find that middle compromise, workable path?
How much time do you have? So
give me the elevator pitch.
That's quite a big, so I think there's a lot of low-hanging fruit out there. For instance, I'll just throw out a couple programs that I've seen in the past. Bicycle benefits program. So if you ride to a business and you're part of that program, you have a little sticker on your helmet, you get a discount at the business. Providing temporary bike parking at festivals when you do gather in the downtown areas. Making the most convenient parking spots bike parking spots. When new larger developments, apartment buildings come into the village, requiring them to have end-of-trip facilities, showers, bike parking, secure bike lockers, so that it's really not an afterthought for a lot of these developments, but also for the ways you're going about your day as well. And then from a behavior change, every time you see a bicyclist on the road, you are more likely to then slow down. and then you see more and more bicyclists, and then you slow down more and more because now you know this is a road where bicyclists are frequenting. So it's just little things like that. I know one of the commissioners mentioned earlier about, just little things that you see every single day that slowly start to change your behavior. So it's not going to be, one fell swoop and then all of a sudden Lake Zurich's a bike community, but it's going to be those little things over time. And then implementing really good infrastructure as well. So safe infrastructure, curb protected bike lanes, moving the paths off the road so that you can enjoy your biking and walking safely and comfortably. So that's my elevator pitch.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sarosh, I don't know if you can answer this question for me, but to that point, in Wheeling, police officers, I see them on bikes all the time. Do we have officers on bikes?
I am not aware of that,
So-
no.
Do we? Perfect. So this is an ideal thing that by example,
They show up at the festivals.
perfect. So
Okay,
then by
thank you.
example, encouraging biking, this is another good way. I mean, Chicago's been trying this forever. And I don't know if they'll ever succeed. Yeah, I know. But I think, because when I'm at the ball fields in Wheeling, they come up. They ride up all the time, and I see them a lot. Almost every weekend I see them. To be honest with you, I've never seen one here in Lake Zurich, and maybe they do go to the festival,
Yeah.
but I don't see them, and I think that's the other thing. We need the optics that are out there to encourage that.
Well, that's the glue that fills in the gaps of fostering greater
And more on a
community strength,
daily,
too.
everyday
Yeah,
basis rather
absolutely.
than for special events.
Yeah, exactly.
And to the point that Antonio brought up about the industrial park and that we're using it as as a concept of getting through, I think it's important to point out, as Aaron has called this, it's the Lake Zurich Together Comprehensive Plan. So that incorporates our residential areas as well as the business areas, as well as the industrial areas. So it is all of us working together to find a comprehensive plan that's going to work. So, yeah, we need everyone's input on that, so.
Yeah, and it is an industrial area, and we're very sensitive to that. However, we've definitely done bike lanes like this before in similar areas and similar corridors, and we can't just simply turn our back, to this part of the entire village because it is such an important connection to get people to the high school, to get people from the neighborhoods to grocery stores, things like that. So, but we do have to be very careful, and we're cognizant of that.
Okay, thanks, Ryan.
Thank you.
Okay. Aaron, you're up again.
All right, I'm going to be mindful of time here while I'm going forward. I think it's in a country in South America, they have the bus drivers ride on stationary bikes while a bus drives by them. So they feel what it feels like. There's a video of it. It's frightening. I feel like a squirrel in traffic, so I don't bike, but just an interesting aside of understanding it. We certainly want to make it safe before we encourage folks to ride bikes. Okay, so our next focus is on sustainability, resilience, and well-being. This is something that you all are really pushing forward. I was really excited to read about the 100% green power with the community streetlights that will be starting in July of 2024. And all of the efforts, the free once-a-year pickup of electronic recycling. I envy a lot of the programs you have here. So to continue these components of making Lake Zurich, which is already leading the charge here, but continuing to lead in the sustainability and resilience, supporting and celebrating those businesses that do it. I was reading about the toy store. You have awards for recognizing that. That's so important. It is not easy to make green decisions all the time. Frankly, it's more expensive a lot of times too, or the cost savings takes years for payoff. So recognizing those businesses and elements that are making that is really important to just advancing that as a community vision in general. Some of the strategies here that we've noted, sustainable building practices. This is a big element when you think about development coming in. How can we incentivize sustainability as part of development? Continuing to educate residents, getting the word out like you're doing with benchmarks and other avenues on those programs, increasing energy efficiency, switching to renewable where possible. We heard through outreach the desire for more locations for community gardens, areas where you can have something special that provides socialization, but this other element of greening in neighborhood parks. And as Ryan is helping to facilitate with the recommendations on mobility, reducing vehicle pollution by increasing those opportunities to walk. The primary buckets here, pun intended, is the lake, water, and stormwater. And so we're going to hit on each of these, but these special elements, these natural resources, how we protect them going forward, how we continue to advance them and fund them. So with the lake and its tributaries, we want to continue to make sure that those are healthy. We are seeing a lot of changes in lake ecosystems these days, everything from zebra mussels to algae, and it's really can be scary. I mean, these are things that you want to make sure things are moving in the right direction and do the testing along the way to make sure it stays healthy. Balancing the access and needs. We recognize that the lake is largely private and all Lake Zurich residents cherish it. And so how we facilitate that balance through those types of seasonal events, through those programs, through those views as development occurs, that really can help channel energy into the areas where we do have ability to do so. And I'm still an advocate for the water taxi idea. Continuing to conduct the shoreline and streamline stabilization, the OSLAD grant that was just secured will continue that, right? Really important, and balancing that conversation on water levels, which we know is going to take some mutual solutions going forward. Green infrastructure, we're recommending all of these things in different avenues. So from part of the design guidelines, when we talk about permeable paving, right? We talk about the need for flexibility. If a developer is doing a lot of green components, can you give some flexibility in other areas? Green roofs, increasing the tree canopy, all of these components come in as part of the streetscape. We've seen really innovative ways of doing rain gardens. You gotta do them right, otherwise they don't look so pretty. But there's really innovative, beautiful ways of engaging greenery and green incentives into the streetscape. That basically outlines what I just shared here, so I'll skip ahead to corridors and special area planning. So we've focused a lot on Main Street. We're gonna be diving deeper with staff on these special areas. It takes some critical thinking and some site-specific elements. So what we've laid out here is these best practices of how we wanna move forward with providing structure within this plan for implementation. We recognize the opportunities and the redevelopment goals holistically on Route 22. But what does that look like on more of a granular level and site-specific component? Also along Rand Road, there are annexation possibilities, right? Conversations. These are in other communities' plans too that have neighboring areas with some of these properties. But when you think about annexing, bringing more property into the village, you have to understand, well, one, what's the plan for it? What's the purpose? Why do we want to extend utilities there? Is the cost benefit there? What is the land use? So those questions about housing, is there a need for housing? What type? Does it make sense? There's properties that when we responded to the RFP were on this list, and we've already said, no, that's too far away. It wouldn't make sense to extend utilities there. So we're already looking at these components, and obviously this is kind of the best practice checklist of what you think about in terms of deciding. Infill development, we want this to reinforce the vision and the themes we've outlined here today. The Kmart property came up a lot as far of our outreach. We've heard a lot about Kmart and how we make that site, which is such a prime location, how do we make something happen there? The southwest corner of Quinton and 22, And then there's not so many vacant industrial anymore, right? That TIF is helping facilitate. When I looked online at Zillow, I think there were 3 when I put together this property. But those spaces cater to a whole host of things, and you have a thriving industrial park. And so those are some of the focus areas. This is some spotlights on what we heard as part of the focus group session with high schoolers. We actually drew out their ideas. I don't think I ever showed this, but they were talking about Block A. They were talking about the gateways into town. So we have a lot to lean into in terms of the feedback we've heard. And, you know, the proximity of the Kmart site to Paulus Park, you think about that component. We heard about that at the farmers market. So we're taking all this into account as we move forward with these focus areas. And that element of teen activities, right? Those indoor activities, how does that come into play? And all of this lands us to arrive at a future land use map, which is really important and a big part of it. But this last chapter that I highlight, you bring it all together on a map. And this will also hit on those nuances of the interplay with zoning, the development process. A lot of these recommendations we need to flag as, oh, these will require some zoning amendments. Anything that, you know, flags those components, we're gonna put a little asterisk next to. And then the character district and design guidelines, which I already outlined, this would be part of that. Just reinforcing what we've run through, Lake Zurich, you have such a wonderful balance of uses. It is something that communities who don't have it, especially during COVID, recognized. So we want to continue that. And we want to put energy into that thriving niche small business development as well. Just an example of some of the tools, TIF, looking to incentives to support the ever-evolving market demands and trends. And then also looking to some of the adaptive retrofits that are going in. How are uses going into spaces that weren't pegged for those spaces, right? So you're seeing that a lot in different industrial spots because of the height of the ceilings, because of the space, or the different types of uses that cater to it. These are just examples of maker spaces and kids' gym. I personally like the brewery example, which is already here. But, and this ties in too with the biking element, right? This is right over there. You think about getting around safely by bike and being able to connect to some of these lesser known maybe destinations. And that's where I cue from brewery to cheers to next step. So our next focus is going to be moving this draft further into development. Taking the feedback that we received today. We'll be posting this presentation onto the website tomorrow, so everyone will have access to it. You can go back, refer to it. If there are ideas, we have the contact page open on the website. Folks can reach out. We will be having our community open house again later in fall, and you all will have that opportunity to see the draft report in advance of that. So we took Q&A along the way. I put some questions up here. If there's anything that inspires you to share more and discuss, I said this meeting would be 60 minutes. If I had told you, it would have been almost 2 hours. It's not a good way to start. But I appreciate the feedback tonight, and we're really excited to move this
If we'd known it was
along.
going to be 2 hours, we might not have had a quorum.
Oh, no. See? Strategic planning.
Just teasing, of course. Okay, questions, now that we've seen the wrap?
I really don't have any more questions other than the ones I've already brought up. I like what I've seen. I think it's moving in the right direction. As I said, it's just, it's a wish list. It's really where we're going to go, and it's a long-term wish list. And that's the one thing I'm taking away from it, and hopefully others are too. So there's a lot of really good things. There's a lot of challenges. Sidewalks for one, bike paths for another. I like a lot of what it could look like. I mean, I've always been jealous of whether it was Highland Park or Wilmette or Lake Forest. I mean, it's just, even Barrington. You know, you're just jealous of these type of things. I see what Wheeling is doing over there in the new park that used to be the old Wix facility. It's just amazing how much money that they are putting into that whole area. And the apartments that are, I think they're called One, and then you have, like I said, from that big monument, you see all of that happening. And it's not even near the train. I mean, it is, but it's not where the train has to come in to get people there. And they've got the water theme park, and they've got all these things. So if these are the things that put Lake Zurich on the map and continue to bring people into our village, and not only that, but volunteer to make things even better on an ongoing basis. I mean, it was tragic what happened in Highland Park, but look how tight that community is. And so when you have a community that's like that, that's what I like saying. So thank you so much for what you've presented.
Thank you, Antonio.
Just echoing what Antonio was saying, I think as part of this, the point you made about volunteership and maintaining momentum, I think it'd be important for this group and the city staff to hear some ideas about how we're in the ideation phase. People are activated and they're excited about getting their ideas out. But as we move into implementation, it's easy for people to lose momentum as roadblocks come up and things slow down and the gears of government grind as they tend to do sometimes. How do we foster that grassroots support for this next vision of Lake Zurich, where it's not just us talking about what a 20-page document says, it's active and visible within the community?
Yeah, excellent point. Within the implementation section, we would work collaboratively to, one, figure out what partners need to be engaged on these specific projects. Those will be local leadership organizations, as well as if there's funding sources or regional partners that you need to work with. Some of these are really well suited to support with volunteer groups. Some of them aren't. And so flagging that where, those pop-up and activations, those can be great to bring people together and bring local artists together. In fact, it relies on that to happen. So as part of the implementation plan, we will be flagging and differentiating those projects. You kind of got to assign a leader. It needs to be a team, and check-ins. So I like to almost think about you would have like a biannual or maybe quarterly, probably biannual, update on progress with the comp plan, right? Where it just sets that tone, that state of address, where, the mayor does that and brings it up. So yes, there needs to be leadership by many parties, and we'll outline that and look for feedback too. Yes, I saw you stand. Come on.
Awesome. One of the other things that we like to do for transportation-related bike ped things is tactile urbanism, which is just a fancy way of temporary demonstrations. So it's kind of a proof of concept for, implementing a bike lane to see if is it going to work. So we were just up in Richmond a couple weeks back doing that. We painted a temporary bike lane there, and then we're just gathering feedback through QR codes and surveys. So that's one way to not only engage people, but kind of do
Like a test bed?
exactly, yeah, like a trial run on, is this actually going to work? We probably want to do something like down Oakwood, but maybe on one of the residential roads, we could do that.
Gotcha.
Since you opened the door, I just want to walk through it now.
Let's do it.
So you brought up transportation. Orlando, was there ever a time, and for some reason I think there was, that we had Pace here in Lake Zurich? Or we had some type of bus?
It was Pace, but there was a link to the train station in Barrington that came through town, very few stops, but it came through town down Old Mill, up Pheasant, and
We had it.
then over to Cuba and straight to Barrington.
Yeah, because they would pick up by us over the wall. So we've had that, and for whatever the reason, it vanished, whether it was cost or whatever. I also know, are we, with the plan, is Ela Township involved at all? Because they have their buses. Ela has their buses, and they pick up seniors. And they have, I think, 2 buses, if I'm not mistaken, and they run them. So this could be something where, through collaboration with Ela Township, which we are a part of, and Gloria's program, we could possibly look to utilizing that. because that's already in play. So it would be maybe expanding it in some way that we got a bus, they have two, all of a sudden you got 3 buses moving around. And so that's that. So I'm right on target with what you're saying. We kind of have that with the ELA grouping. So it's about possibly getting them into this conversation, especially when it comes down to transportation.
Yeah, and if that's more of a concern for the committee, we can also look into, talking with PACE and then see if there's any long-term visions or goals for activating more public transit service within Lake Zurich or adjacent to it.
And I'll just add that, yes, Ela Township is a partner. They were one of the stakeholders that we interviewed at the early stages of input gathering.
Again, it's ideal. You don't have to create something new. It already exists as far as their buses go. And then it's just a matter of saying, okay, here's going to be the routes that we'll publish and go from there.
Okay, no, good suggestion.
That reminds me, we, 2 things I wanted to note is one, we're mindful of the busing component with residential streets. That was something that Mike Brown brought up, that balance of if you put in infrastructure and understanding that. And we had explored a bit about, so for key events and programming going forward, you could decide to fund a shuttle for these one-off events from local metros, right? It would be really to draw in visitors from, coming in, but that could be facilitated and be you could pilot that project out as a one-time cost around Rock the Block or flag that too.
We've done that in the past. So when the expo used to be over at Lake Zurich, they would have a trolley that
Right.
would pick up people at different parking areas, bring them over to the high school, and keep running them back. So those things have been done, and I think those are things that are practical to do.
Good.
Jake, you're a walkability guy. You got any final comments for us?
I guess the one thing that's occurring to me now is how do we leverage, to the point Antonio's making, our existing resources? So I'm thinking about things like Rock the Block, Miracle Mile. How do we integrate launches of new programs or new features of the community in conjunction with those things that already bring people into town? Instead of crafting from whole cloth, how do we integrate in a way where we're leveraging something that we already know brings people into town?
Yeah, absolutely. I would, I'm just looking down at some of the programming components. So you kind of want to tie in what relevant programs and activities or busking relates to this. So for example, the alley example that I brought up, right? That 3rd place. You might not want to do that on Miracle on Main, but maybe you do. It might block wind great in there. Could that be set up with colorful string lights over it where you have some sort of community event? Now, cold with painting and doing those types of things gets a little not conducive. So you might look to more of a kid-friendly event where you bring in a local artist and they're able to, if you have a mural that you've landed on or some sort of design, they can go in and outline the mural, and then you can bring in residents, or maybe it's a committee or a volunteer group, students from the high school that then can come in and infill it. I usually like to think of, know your audience. So doing a bit of matchmaking between what we've outlined here, whether it's a parklet day competition among high schoolers or students where you have a series of parking spaces you block off, or maybe it's a parking lot, right? And you're able to create an activation event around that. But strategically tying in with all of the events you have is absolutely the way to go about it.
And then just one thing that randomly occurred to me. We just recently went through our major water infrastructure upgrade, and then you had a slide about rain barrels. How do we think about those big kind of gray, boring projects that people kind of just write off as stakes of living somewhere, but thinking about how to tack on programs according to that, because everybody's water bill just went up according to the Michigan access infrastructure. How do you create a rain barrel program to go along with that? So you're incenting people to think about, I can improve my property, use less water, and now my water bill might be higher, but I found a way to defray that cost.
Yeah, green infrastructure programs. That's something that from the community feedback and our work also could lead into kind of an organic committee being formed around that, especially with the momentum from the Lake Michigan water being pursued. That is a long-term goal and a very worthy one. And so education programs and DIY with rain barrels, and maybe the village can, offset costs in some way to incentivize participation. We've created handouts on all those fun, engaging ways to do it. But yeah, there's certainly opportunities there. As part of the community gardens too, you could look to pollinators and those kind of landscaping recommendations that are pretty and they soak up a lot of water. There's ways to tie the two together. Yeah.
Okay, Yildi?
The only thing I was thinking of is, as we were talking about everything, and I'm all for bike paths and more walkways and sidewalks and all of that, but I guess I'm also concerned about parking. I know, Sunset Pavilion is just an amazing, business amenity. It's incredible, but let's face it, the parking is not there. I remember when we were first talking about the corner of Main Street and Old Rand Road, the apartments, and there was concerns, and there was talk that there's not adequate parking downtown. That's why businesses don't come to downtown. That's why nobody wants to develop downtown, because you don't have the parking. But then I thought we came back and said there is adequate parking, people just don't know where it is. Have we addressed that? Because, we keep talking about downtown, and a lot of these things happen in that general area. I just think we need to do a better job of making people aware and providing adequate parking, because there isn't adequate parking at Sunset, sadly.
Right around the
Now,
time
we'll
you
all
were-
be walking and biking, so maybe it won't matter.
Yeah.
Yay, but I don't think so, because I'm not biking across Rand Road. I live on the west side of Rand Road, so that's not gonna happen.
Speaking to your
So-
point of parking in the Main Street area, right around the time you were talking about those issues with the apartments coming up,
Yeah.
a parking study was done to identify all of the public parking lots and available parking lots in the Main Street area. I think one of the things that the consultants are suggesting is also wayfinding, to show people where the parking lots are located and what's available. So that is something that we'll be looking at as well.
Mhm.
So wayfinding is integral to the way people identify ways to get to their destinations
right.
from the outskirts of town or from their neighborhoods.
Right.
And it's important that you provide clear directions to how they get there so that they're comfortable, as you said. I'm using the word comfortable because I think that's a very, very important way to suggest something so that it makes it convenient and safe for someone.
Yeah.
We didn't get into it, but in the design guidelines, I know it was brought up. Sean, you had mentioned about curb cuts. Along Old Rand, as that development changes, there's some key properties, integrating shared parking in the rear and also understanding how the balance of uses cater to shared parking at different times of day, right? So if you have a breakfast restaurant, right, but in the evening time, parking demand's not there. That's a component that we are recommending as part of, it comes into the design guidelines as part of reducing curb cuts and orienting that parking. But it's also about adjacent uses and context. So Sunset Pavilion, which is on the water and doesn't have a parking lot for good reason, how does that come into play with public-private partnerships, working with those other businesses to understand how there can be overlap of enjoyment and space?
Yeah.
As well as, do you need to look at some of the residential streets to maybe limit parking at certain times, but also provide it? So I'm not the expert on this topic, but those are some initial thoughts. I'll let Ryan chime in.
Yeah, and if there are, high traffic areas, parks, attractions, amenities that there is a lack of parking at, if there is a bike lane going down that street, it could end right before you get to that and continue the on-street parking and then just have shared lane markings with just kind of indicating that this is still a bike route, but you lose the bike lane for a little bit. You could also go, there's a lot of settings where you can go from the curb, bike lane, a parking lane, and then a travel lane if you have the width as well. So there are a lot of ways to configure it so that you can still have all the things you need. There's also, if you put both bidirectional bike lanes on one side, you can actually save about 3 to 4 feet, on that roadway and still have those parking lanes as well. So there's a lot of ways to configure it. We're not going to get quite granular enough to like discuss on a block by block basis on the comp plan, but just for your edification, there are a lot of ways to do that.
Yeah, and I think that if we did the transportation part of it, we could have an off lot that's parking and then have some bus or something bring you into town and take you back out. So that could also be a potential. I'm not saying it is. I'm simply saying it's something to think about. Or if another building comes before us on Block A, and maybe it is 3 stories because the bottom story is now all parking. I'm just saying, it's things to consider. I'm not
Right.
saying that it's going to be. I'm simply saying that it's.
I just think parking needs to be.
Addressed.
Addressed. You can't write it off, and it has to be an integral part of what we're talking about, because people want to come, but if they have nowhere to park, and most people, we all love our cars, I mean, realistically, they can't park, they're not coming.
Yeah, no, and I completely agree with that. And I don't think any of the things we've discussed in my presentation, precludes parking or eliminates parking. So
Right, right.
just to give you that kind of peace of
I
mind.
just wanted to have maybe, a voice.
Of course,
And,
yeah.
and it's as important as many of the other things that
Sure.
we've talked about.
Of course. Yep, definitely.
Good, thank you. John, final thoughts?
Not too many. The one question I had was about recommendations around funding sources, but you had addressed that in an earlier comment, so good to hear. I guess piggyback on comments around Sunset Pavilion. I mean, it is such a tremendous asset, and truly one of the saddest days of the year for me is when they stop selling alcohol down there and I can't walk there after work. And so keeping the lakefront activated year round, I think I welcome it. Being able to drive enough traffic down there to make sense of keeping bathroom facilities open year round even would be a huge thing. We continue to use the parks year round, but it gets difficult, especially again with young children. There's one outhouse out at Paulus. There's really not an option at Breezewald, and we've gotten creative a couple times. And so, I think continued activation of the lake or year round. Not having an off season is so critical to driving traffic to Lake Zurich year round.
Yes. I have a toddler, so I respect how creativity looks in that regard. Our garden is watered. But what I would say too is absolutely that came up at the farmer's market and multiple times thereafter, because folks walk around the lake too all season long, and there isn't a facility in between. You have to disrupt your normal walk to get someplace. That would be a capital improvement that we would recommend, or partnering with Sunset Pavilion. I'd love to see Sunset Pavilion open more. Maybe it could be a longer seasonal, how does that look? Yes, we welcome ideas there too, because that's gotten a lot of attention. But the facilities is something I was just looking back at today, because it's been a repeat comment.
Okay. Thanks, John. Scott?
I have everything everybody's already said. We talked about wayfinding and signage and stuff. Do you provide like design recommendations or something like that, or what signage can look like that ties everything together, that's not the typical IDOT, retroreflective piece
Yes.
of aluminum that
Right.
is everywhere?
The answer is yes. That would be that next, not as part of the comprehensive plan. That family of signage, the parking review, the streetscape, that is typically what I showed in those 2 streetscape examples. That's kind of that phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 of the engineering and construction.
Gotcha.
There's a lot of technical components of it. There's a lot of design and fun components. The comprehensive plan will outline inspiration and need, like that is the recommendation, the locations of gateways. Getting into the level of what specifically it looks like and the locations of it will need to dovetail with the streetscape plan, public works, working on that partnership, whether it's with your engineers or bringing in a consultant.
Okay.
Tesca does that work, just saying. To think through all those moving pieces.
So it's part of the comprehensive, but like you said before, it's bird's eye view, not kind of down in the weeds yet.
Right. It'll be a project recommended as part of immediate next steps.
Okay.
Do we have to put a qualification on the thing about the ad placement, or is that, do we not need an ad placement warning?
Not at this time yet.
Okay. No other questions?
No.
Erin, thank you very much.
Thank you all very much.
This has been a lot of information, a lot of hard work has gone into this, but I think we're definitely moving in the right direction.
We're excited.
All right, thank you. Thanks, Ryan. Okay, public comment. Now, if there's anyone in the audience that wishes to address what we've spoken on this evening? Mr. Hilt, you want to add anything to your earlier comment that we all didn't get to hear?
Sure, I'll clarify that. My name is Mike Hilt. I live at 598 Dunhill Drive here in Lake Zurich. I also work in Lake Zurich. I also serve the community as president of the Lake Zurich Industrial Council. And
And on the police board as well?
oh yeah, I'm a fire and police commissioner as well
Okay.
too. Other than that, I don't do much of anything. I do want to keep an open mind to, well, first of all, I understand that this comprehensive plan it's a framework, it's a guideline. And my comments before about the bike paths in the industrial park, it wasn't necessarily, a negative. I'm against it. It's just I just still need some time to get my mind around that and the opinions of the other property owners in the industrial park too. See, our industrial park is unique in the fact that it's like 85% owner occupied. So it's it's a lot of people that I know whose personal livelihoods are at stake in those properties in the park. And
They have skin in the game.
yeah, definitely have skin in the game. Thank you, Orlando. Yeah, and so we're just trying to, keep an eye on that too. But an open mind to it too, and I recognize that, change is the essence of life, and we need to look at them, but we need to be careful too, just to make sure that we cover all the bases of safety. As Antonio put it, we don't want to see anybody get wiped out by a errant vehicle or truck driver. But no, I really like the framework of this comprehensive plan. It's definitely a document that we can all move forward with. So thank you guys for all your. Yes, I was at the farmer's market, and I was even on the committee that worked to develop the 2003 comprehensive plan. So I've been here for many, many years, and I've raised my kids here, and like I said, I still live here, and so I want to make sure that it's well taken care of, right?
All right.
All right, so thank you guys very much for your time and
We'll
all
see you
your
at the
hard
open
work on
house.
all this.
We'll see you at the open house in the fall when
Yeah,
Erin gets it
absolutely.
set up.
Oh, yeah.
All right, good, thanks, Mike. Anyone else, sir? No? Okay. Then, there is a reminder, guys, that for our July meeting, that there will be 2 meetings. I know that Zurich sent out the invitation for that, looking for the request on if everyone's available for Wednesday and Thursday.
Yes.
Because of the OSK application, that will be set then for the Wednesday, because they were already given notice. The other applicants that we have will be moved to the Thursday night. So if you haven't yet responded, please do, so we know that we have quorum for the 2 nights.
I've gotten responses from 7 of the 8 commissioners,
Oh,
so.
good.
At this time, we do have a quorum for both meetings, but I would obviously ask everyone to make their best efforts to attend both meetings if possible. Just as a matter of note, I know we've also been talking to the new applicants themselves to gauge their availability for the Thursday. One of them has come back saying that he would prefer to maybe be considered on Wednesday after the OSK. So we've told them then, well, you're welcome to wait. So we will publish our notices in a way where it gives that flexibility to be able to be considered if time allows
Yeah.
on Wednesday. But obviously, all of them will be told that Thursday would be the date if they can make it. So I just wanted to put that on the table as well. Otherwise, yes, this is a busy time of the year, and just like we did last year, where in July, actually, the same month, we had Midlothian Manor, and whatever new applications were coming up, considered on 2 consecutive nights, and it worked out just fine. So, again, we appreciate your setting aside your time to come here now on 2 consecutive nights, so thank you for that. Apart from that, we are getting our reports ready, reviewing the applications, and we'll bring them all to you with materials at the next meeting. We've already actually shared this information with the OSK because they had included information or depictions of the materials. We've asked them to bring samples as well, so they have agreed to that. So we will see that at the next meeting.
They don't need to bring in the full length of the cement board,
No,
but the
Just the
section.
samples and colors. That's what we've told them. Yeah, and they will.
Point of information then.
Yeah.
When we do a continuance, does it automatically default to the next meeting, or can we designate when that continuance can take place?
You can designate. In this particular case, the applicant had requested a short continuance, which is why the commission had obliged, but no, it's not required that you continue only to the next meeting. You can continue to a date specific. We've done that in the past with 120 Telsa. If you recall, that item had languished on the agenda for a number of months, and we just gave the applicant the opportunity to tell us when they were ready to come back. And there was one continuance that was I believe a 2-month continuance.
The reason I asked the question is because then, in all fairness to those other 4, they should have had their own slot, and that should have gone one past it.
Or typically, what we would have also done is, had we begun the discussion of this at the last meeting, we could have put OSK on the Thursday night and the new applications on the Wednesday expected date.
For me, one of the things that I don't want to do is establish a precedence that says we're going to be here Wednesday and Thursday from
Right.
now on,
Yeah.
anytime one of these comes up.
Correct.
And this is we've got this month with 2 meetings, we're going to have next month with 2 meetings. I don't want to see a precedence get set all of a sudden just because.
Right.
And
These are-
I understand.
Yeah, these are both unusual cases.
Got it.
We typically get 1 large project a year, is what I've seen now in my time here. And so very rarely, I mean, the last time we had was last year at this time with Midlothian Manor, but no other time during the year. And in the past, it was Lifetime before that. But Lifetime stayed month to month, and we were fortunate not to have too many other applications that same night. This time, for whatever reason, it just kind of like came together where, being the fact that it was a cold spring, and when the heat opened up, people decided, oh, I need my application done, or I need my project done. So that's what's happening here. So I don't believe we will be setting precedents, but we will let people know. And in the future, also, continued items may, at the discretion of the PZC, get the second slot. The first slot will be given to new applicants.
Thank you.
That didn't happen this time, though. Yeah,
But I
that's fine.
do want to stress, as he did, about the samples going forward on
Yes, we've
all
already
future
spoken to them.
projects.
Yeah, we had a conversation with them on Tuesday, and that was one of the things we let them know.
And nothing that was said this evening meant that we weren't happy to come back for a second meeting for you tonight. We enjoyed that, so thank you.
This is a special meeting, as we say,
Yeah.
so.
Okay. Then that's everything. I think we are set for our next meeting in July. So I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you. Antonio, thank you, Sean. Call the roll, please, Colleen.
Commissioner Castillo. Commissioner Gloas.
Aye.
Commissioner Marks.
Aye.
Commissioner Morrison.
Aye.
Commissioner Schultz,
Aye.
Chairman Stratman.
Aye. We are adjourned, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good night.